Hi, everybody. Okay, let me the presentation. Okay, my name is Armando Gallegos, and I'm going to talk about on a deterministic mathematical model which predicts efficiently the protective effect of a plant extract mixture in xerotic rats. I come from Universidad de Guadalajara, Mexico. Okay, here we can see the contents of the presentation. We start with the introduction, mathematical model, model fitted to experimental data, and conclusions. Okay, cirrhosis is a very known disease and ranks 11th in the world's leading causes of death in the world. And here we can see the cirrhosis have many causes. For example, alcoholism, obesity, or hepatitis, for example. But we can find several causes of this disease. Okay. In our biology group here in the university, they perform an experiment with rats, where the rats were induced with the cirrhosis with tetrachloride, and of course the healthy hepatocytes become damaged, and these damaged hepatocytes dead. And it's well known that the proteins levels, AST and ILT, increase in terms of the damaged hepatocytes. And the group, the biology group, induced cirrhosis by means of tetrachloride. And the idea is to protect the damage with the extract made of plants. Of course, this experiment was modeled with the following mathematical expression. The first equation describes the healthy hepatocytes levels. The first term is, of course, a logistical term, and the second term describes the interaction with the tetrachloride with the healthy hepatocytes. And note that the extract levels influence the coefficient of the interaction of the tetrachloride with the healthy hepatocytes. The second equation describes the damaged hepatocytes. Of course, the first term comes from the first equation, and the second term describes the natural death of the damaged hepatocytes. The equations 3 and 4 describes the proteins level, and where the first term describes the increasing of the level in terms of the damaged hepatocytes, and the second term describes the stability, the natural stability of the levels in terms of the normal protein levels. Finally, the equations 5 and 6 describe the concentration of the tetrachloride and the extracts. Of course, we suppose for each rat, initially all the hepatocytes are healthy, and we have no damaged hepatocytes. The initial values of the proteins are normal, and the concentrations of the tetrachloride and extract are established in terms of these values, where these values C star is the tetrachloride concentration reached in liver tissue, and the extract concentration reached in liver tissue. So when the tetrachloride or the extract are administered, the level of the concentration increase in these values C star and extract star. Okay, talking about the model fitting and the experimental data. The experimental data were taken from this reference. Of course, this reference comes from the biology group. Well, okay, and the first group contains the rat control. The second group, the rats, includes rats where cirrhosis induced by tetrachloride only. Finally, the third group include rats with damage with the tetrachloride, but including the extract of plants. Visually, here we can see for the control group, we can see the healthy liver. For the cirrhotic rats, here we can see a very damaged liver, and the third group, we can see that damaged liver, but not enough. This is healthier liver in comparison to the second one. Okay, we try to get parameters in terms of biology sense. So we find the pharmacokinetics parameters in terms of the literature. So, for example, for the tetrachloride, the rate of the tetrachloride is taken from this reference, and the concentrations are taken for the same reference. For the extract, pharmacokinetics was taken from this reference in terms of the rate, the concentration, and the extract income. For the proteins levels, the values were taken from the control group, and the values are in the these intervals for the ICAT and LAT. The values of the growth rate and the stabilization parameters from the proteins were taken from this reference. Finally, the rate of death of damaged hepatocytes were taken from this reference, and only we have two parameters to be fixed. So the parameter fitting was used with the FMINCON library of MATLAB, and minimized the error in terms of the AST and LAT measured values, and the healthy and damaged values, both for the only tetrachloride administration and the tetrachloride and extract administration. Only for healthy rat, of course, we have 100% of healthy hepatocytes. We have no damaged hepatocytes, and the proteins have the normal levels, of course, but as expected. But for a simulation of cirrhotic rat, for example, and here we can see one sample. We start with 100 healthy hepatocytes. We administered the tetrachloride, and the healthy hepatocytes decrease until 30%, and the damaged hepatocytes increase until 70%. The proteins levels start with normal levels and increase to this red point. Was is the experimental measure level after sacrifice the rat. And after the administration of the tetrachloride, we let to evolve the simulation 1 year, but without damage, and note what we have a slightly recovery, but not of course it's not enough. For this simulation, here we can see the cirrhotic rat, but treated with the extract. So we start with the 100 healthy hepatocytes, and note what the decreasing is only until 80%, and the damaged hepatocytes starts in 0 and increase only until 20%. Note that protein levels remains within the normal levels. I forgot to explain that these green dashed lines describes the interval of the normal levels of the proteins. Again, we let evolve the simulation 1 year after the damage treatment, and note we have a very good recovery until 90% of healthy hepatocytes and only 10% of damaged hepatocytes. Okay, these tables show the parameters used in the simulation, and note that the parameters fitted are very stable. Note, yeah. And of course, the initial values of proteins were taken randomly. So this is the reason why you can see more deviation of the initial values of the proteins, both for the only cirrhotic rats and the cirrhotic and with treatment rats. Finally, here we can see the simulation of a virtual rat, where for the first 4 weeks, the damage is induced, but after that, we remain with the damage, but we are now include the treatment with the extract plant. Note then the including of the extract reduce the effects of the damage, but of course no bad data. But here we can see that the damage is reduced considerably, and in fact the proteins levels, of course, the effect is reduced. Okay. Finally, here we can see the conclusions. Okay, the mathematical model successfully describes the data of tetrachloride induced cirrhosis and rats either treated with extract or not. The initial values of the proteins are in line with our rat experimental results. All the parameter values are consistent with real biological experiments taken from the literature. There is a very little variation between barometer values for each rat, as would be expected. This model can be used to study controlled schemes of liver injury, which can help biologists decide the most appropriate one, depending on the purpose of the experiment in this case. And finally, in the simulation with the virtual rat, it's clear that the inclusion of the extract reduced the effects of the tetrachloride, although it does not eliminate them. Okay, I want to thank to CMMSE 2023 team for the kind invitation. Dr. Maria de la Luz Miranda Beltrán, she is she leads the biology group. Master Luis Enrique Ayala Hernández, Master Gabriela Rosales Muñoz, and Dr. Jorge Eduardo Macías Díaz. Thank you very much for your attention. And finally, here we can see the reference. Thank you so much.